What's up, Tube? Welcome back to Loguido's Chop Shop, the second best gel blaster channel on the tubes. Today I've got for you a new blaster to look at. It is a, I think, I can't pronounce the brand, ZH is the brand. It is a SR-25 762 blaster. Of course it's not 762 because it's a gel blaster which takes 7mm Orbis. So but that's cute. I like it. It gives you a, it gives you that nice fat 762 style magwell. And let's take a look at it. You can see down here it's got some nice engraving on it. This is a nylon receiver. It's all nylon. Trigger feels nylon. Handguard is nylon, and in fact the handguard is clamped on very interestingly here. But I think feels like the outer barrel in there is aluminium or alloy, and then we have the buffer tube here which is aluminium, and it says 762 on the buffer tube as well, which is cute. Interestingly enough, it says 556 on the suppressor, but we'll forget about that, won't we? So being that this is a marksman rifle, it's only got semi and safe modes here, and on the other side where the fire selector is, it is only semi and safe. But the cute thing here is that there is actually a hole which goes through the selector. You see here, like that, that allows you to push the selector over the stop and into the position which I imagine is auto. So yeah, you semi and safe, which is, I guess it's true to the replicaness of it. That feels like an alloy selector, and this looks like an alloy bolt release, and that looks like an alloy mag release. The magazine is a nice big fat 762 style mag. It looks like it's just a 762 sized Gen 8 type of mag, and I say Gen 8 being that it's got the door on the back, it's got the two terminals on the top, and it's got the push button there and the little spot there. So I mean, it wouldn't actually fit a Gen 8, it's too big obviously, but the style of mag that they've gone for, very very Gen 8-esque, makes me feel like it's back in the Gen 8 era. Being all nylon also is an interesting, except for the buffer tube there, is it does make me feel like it's kind of back in the Gen 8 era a little bit, because most of the blasters on the market these days are mostly metal or have a large percentage of metal. People don't go in for the nylon things so much anymore, but let's have a look at this. Let's load some gel balls into this magazine and see how it goes. Unfortunately, I have a whole bunch of fresh gel balls from previous videos that I've just been doing. Gel balls, if you're not aware, is just another name for Orbis. Gel blasters shoot Orbis, kind of like a paintball gun, but not paint, just little balls of jelly. Alright, that should probably be enough just to get a chrono reading. Let's hook up the battery, which should be located in the buffer tube. There it is. It looks like a little 18650 type battery. Yes, it is. Two 18650s, which makes it a 7.4 volt blaster. I'll plug that one in, and I'll get my chrono set up ready to test. Okay, so I set up my chrono, and I have just loaded in a magazine full of hardened gels from vendor X, and they're about 7.5 millimeters, and they proceeded to immediately jam. You can see. Oh, one came out. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just going to empty these out and put some better gels in, I think. Not necessarily better in terms of quality of the gel, but just this blaster doesn't like those gels. Alright, I've just loaded some other gels in. Of course, I'm going to have to clear the barrel. We'll just put a few down to clear the barrel. Alright, hopefully the barrel's clear now. Some interesting results there. Alright, I'm going to reset this so that we get a fresh count, and then I'll load some more of those gels in. Actually, there's plenty in there. What's going on? Let's see. Try some semi shots. Alright, so we're looking around 200 on semi. Yeah. I'll try full. Yeah, 200. Around max of 206, average of 186. This really does take me back to Gen 8 days. It doesn't really like the hardened gels, and when I put the softer ones in there, it's maxing out at 200 FPS. That's interesting. That's pretty poor by today's standards, actually. Alright, let's eject this mag. You can see the soft white gels that I had to use in it to get it to actually work. I think the reason it probably wasn't firing the hardened ones very well and jamming up was because it's probably just not powerful enough to deal with those types of gels. Alright, and let's find out why. Let's pull it apart. First of all, start by disconnecting the battery. The tiny little 7.4 volt 18650 battery. And then we will knock these pins out. Actually, I'm going to take this. Yeah, we'll knock these pins out. Do that. Alright. More milkies come flying out. Alright, pins come out nice and easy, hopefully. So does the receiver. It does have a really basic looking faux bolt type arrangement here. The dust cover does seem to close and operate in the prescribed manner, so that's good. Now, let's see. will this come apart? Usually sort of slide forward a bit. This one could be different because it is all nylon, so there could be some extra little, I think the bolt catch might have actually been in there holding it. Yes, that's what it was. The little bolt release sort of locked up in there, preventing me from sliding the thing forwards. Alright, let's see what treasures await. Wow, we've got a nice long pink alloy barrel and one of the longest T-pieces I've ever seen in my life, complete with weird sprues. Yeah, okay, so I guess the T-piece is super long because of that 7.62 type receiver there. It's different. It's different. I'll tell you that much. Let's take a look at this gearbox. It looks quite interesting. So the reciprocating action for this faux bolt, which I don't know, just looks looks really ugly. It doesn't, like some of the faux bolts I've seen look kind of alright, but this one, I don't know, just doesn't really have much going on. But it's all, the action is all built into the gearbox. Like there's a spring retained on the top of the gearbox, which is built in there to just do that, I guess. And does that, I don't think that grabs on the, does it grab on the, I'm just gonna fire this once just to see if it grabs on the piston, see if it actually reciprocates. I don't think it does, but it seems weird to build it into the gearbox if it's not going to. No, it doesn't. It just sits there. It's got a whole section built into the top of this gearbox purely for pulling the charging handle. It's interesting. Oh, you know what that means. Oh no, the charging handle's got its own spring as well. Yeah, weird. I don't know why they did that. There's a massive chunk of metal behind this gearbox here, which is, I guess, bracing the spring guide, which is good. That's, I mean, it's good to brace the back of this because that's a potential failure point, and I guess you can alleviate the possibilities of that. And that's also because I guess we've got this V2 style gearbox kind of inside this massive 7.62 style receiver, so you got to sort of bolster it up with a chunky piece of metal there and a massive T up the front, because otherwise you're gonna have a lot of empty space, I guess. It looks like it's made out of some sort of nylon material, the gearbox, which is again not really what you come to expect these days. These days you'd expect usually a cast alloy. That doesn't mean this is necessarily a bad gearbox, because I've seen some pretty bad cast alloy gearboxes. It's definitely interesting though, like it's got these little holes here, it's got this weird thing at the top there for the faux bolt. Let's just keep pulling this apart and continue on our journey. I just noticed another weird thing about this gearbox. The little hinge for this bolt release that actually doesn't do anything, it's purely for, you know, aesthetics. It's actually
I don't know if you can see this, is actually built into the gearbox. The bolt release is built into the gearbox. It hinges on the gearbox itself. So there's like integral moldings for the bolt release on the actual gearbox, which is weird because it's unnecessary to do that. And the bolt release doesn't do anything. It has no function. It doesn't hold this or anything like that. It's literally a nothing thing, and it's weird. Alright, continue on. I will take the motor out next, and interestingly enough, there's no adjustment plate for the motor there. So I guess you set it. I don't hate that, you know. I don't hate that. I like the whole setting your motor height and then not having to adjust it, but you don't get a choice here. I'm gonna grab a screwdriver, undo these, and we'll get that motor out. Alright, let's get this 2 Phillips head screws out of the bottom, and motor plate should come up. Motor plate is made of nylon by the looks of it. Nylon or some sort of plastic. It's not a metal plate. And yeah, no adjustment on that at all. Inside here we have a motor which looks like a pretty standard 480 motor. Interestingly enough, there's no grub screw. No grub screw on that. Not only is there no grub screw, but there's even no thread in this hole. So even if you wanted to put a grub screw on, you couldn't, because you can't thread it into anything. It's just got a hole there with no thread. The tower doesn't have a support bearing, so that's nice and cheap. Probably not great. Doesn't look like a spectacular motor. Again, I can't tell specs just by looking at it, but I can tell it doesn't have neodymium magnets. Alright, moving on. Let's get this grip off. Looks like 4 Phillips head screws in this grip. Alright. That away. Now the next thing, I've got to get this buffer tube off. I need my special long screwdriver. Looks like a Phillips head. Buffer tube screws are one of the biggest pains in all of blaster assembly / disassembly. Just finding a screwdriver that's just long enough to get down in there and to be able to get in there, and taking it off is not the difficult part, but putting it back on again, it's just a pain. Some are better than others. Alright. Now, oh wow. The edge on this buffer tube is so sharp, and it's sort of, oh wow, it's like super sharp, and that's where your wires run through. So yeah. Surprisingly, the insulation on these wires is uncompromised, but I reckon that edge is so sharp it would very shortly cut through any wire. I'm going to file that down because it is so sharp. It's like some it's like some manufacturing some Chad or something that's left over, and it's just like super sharp. Alright, I remove this, and let's get the mag release button out. Oh, that came out incredibly quick. I was expecting more than that. Alright, one last pin and then we're good to go. That pin came out surprisingly easily. Now I don't see a knurled end on this side, so I'm going to try pushing it the other way just in case there is a knurled end. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. There isn't in this case, so just going to grab it with a pair of pliers just to get it out. Alright, so should be just about good to slide this gearbox out of the receiver. Oh, yep, there we go. Oh, check out that. Check that out. You could kill someone by dropping that on their head. That is so chunky. That is massive, massive piece of billet steel in the back of that thing. It does not even got like a screw hole. I thought it might have a screw hole in it for the buffer tube screw to screw. No, it's just literally a massive chunk of steel just sitting in there. Look at the bolt release. There's the bolt release sitting there happily on the side of the gearbox because it's molded. The hinges are molded into the gearbox for absolutely no reason whatsoever. I don't know why they did that. Why'd they do that? You know what that means? I think that means if you change the gearbox to something else, you're it might be alright actually. I was going to say your bolt release is probably just going to flap around, but I think the bolt release is probably just going to flap around anyway, so I think it should be okay, even with a different gearbox. Yeah, we'll see. It's weird though. I don't know why they bothered to do that. We've got some solid bushes. Some weird, like the design of this, some of these bits of this gearbox is weird. It's like they've designed this section here to run the wires through or something. It's like this relief in here is like some relief for maybe the mag terminals. Speaking of mag terminals, look at the size of them. They are huge. They're so big they could actually they can short on each other if you want to touch them together, which is a horrible design. It's a terrible design. But still not the worst blaster I've ever seen. I got a feeling that this wire that's down this side was intended to be down this side. I got a feeling that that wire is supposed to run down in that little channel instead of running down this side and doing whatever it's doing on this side. That's what I want to think, because otherwise why else would you have this channel here? It's unnecessary. There's a lot of oil, at least. Very well lubricated gearbox. Mag springs are ginormous. Why? Anyway, let's continue taking this apart. On the other side here, I'll just remove this faux bolt. Get it out of the way. This thing, what is with that? It's huge.
And interestingly, like while it does give support to the back of this gearbox, there's not much else going on to support this spring retainer. It's not even like it has a screw through it or anything. Like they could have, I feel like if they're going to go to this effort, they could have like even just had like a little nipple or something poking out of there that actually sat in there that would interface with that spring retainer and then just hold it steady as well. That'd be a cool thing. Not impossible to implement. In fact, you could probably just drill a hole down the center of this and put a screw through there, which would screw into the retainer. In fact, that's probably what I'll do at a later date when I do mean things to this. It looks like from this side it looks like a pretty average V2 gearbox, but then when you look at this side it's all wild and wacky with these bits and pieces. Let's pop it out, pop the spring out and open the gearbox. Let's do that. If I can, there we go. Spring retainer is definitely nothing special, just a piece of plastic. The gears inside are actually all metal though. That's a good sign. Alright, let's take this box apart. Looks like it's got a lot of 2mm Allen head screws holding it together. When I say a lot, I mean more than usual. There's quite a few. There's 4 across the top here. Alright, I'm going to undo them off camera because you don't want to watch me undo screws all day. Alright, so I've got all the screws out now. Keeping in mind this still does have a spring mechanism in here. I'm just going to carefully take apart the box, trying not to lose everything in the process. Now, fortunately for me, it seems like the spring mechanism stayed in the top half and everything else stayed in the bottom half, including the bushes, which is interesting. Another thing that I find interesting, this mechanism here, it looks like it's... Oh, okay, so this is actually quite interesting. So it looks like there's a piece coming down here which is designed to interface with this piston here, and the slot, there is a slot in the piston right here. Looks like that is designed to catch something to, you know, reciprocate that the faux bolt here. So it's like it's designed with that in mind. But probably the part that I find more interesting is back here. The molding. There's a slot even back here which is for wires, and then there's a molding here for a push button switch, which would be for the mag priming. Let me just demonstrate. Alright, so with the introduction of a cheap push button switch into this position here, when this, you probably have to just alter the legs a little bit, I think,
slightly. There you go. When this charging handle is pulled back, that will press that button. Click. Like that. And then there's enough space here in the gearbox to run some wires out the back there to have a functional mag priming circuit. So I always find it interesting when companies go to the effort of R&Ding these molds to include such things and then not including them. So that's interesting, but I like the fact that it's there and it's available. So if you want to just chuck that in, you could have a mag priming circuit connected to the charging handle. You could also potentially do something here to make this faux bolt reciprocate with the piston, although I don't see the point really. Most of the time you don't even see that bit, you're not looking at it, doesn't matter. The gears are metal, the rack on the piston is metal. That's an interesting rack. It looks like the casting of it is really janky and cheap, but it looks like it's a war interest piston, or at least a copy thereof. I mean, the piston head looks like war interest, but all this stuff, the nozzle and the cylinder head, looks like Gen 8. So it's like they've got Gen 8. It's like a fusion. It's like a war interest Gen 8 fusion. Very interesting. Although this while it's the same spec as the war interest, it's definitely not the same quality. That's for sure. The metal rack, it looks alright. It's weird how it sort of sticks out the back here, but that's to account for that thing that some people would call angle of engagement, or AOE. The war interest have that set back. I'd be interested to compare this piston to a war interest piston and just see what the difference is. Alright, I've got a war interest piston here. Pay no attention to the fact that someone's actually jammed a washer in between the piston head and the piston assembly itself. Someone's tried to do some monkey business there. So the head's slightly different actually. Yeah, alright, so the piston head looks different, but the actual no, the slot on top is a lot shorter as well. And the length of interesting. So that's interesting. The length of the rack is identical, but the piston itself is shorter. So that's why they've sort of compensated by having the rack kind of stick out the back of the piston instead of ending flush, which is weird. It's very, yeah, interesting. I wonder if that's something to do with this gearbox, whether or not it has something that it might foul on back here or something. I can't see anything. Oh wait, no. Is it the... maybe it's so it doesn't bind up on that. Yeah, right. So I can see here the last tooth. Yeah, okay, interesting. The last tooth on the sector, when it's letting go, the piston is almost completely bound on the back of the gearbox here, and the
the piston is actually clearanced for the spring retainer.
So I mean, to me the obvious thing to do there would be just to short stroke the thing one tooth, but yeah, they've removed. Yeah, okay, interesting. That makes upgrading pistons in this thing a bit of a challenge. Not really, I guess. I was going to say it makes it challenging because you're going to have to customize the piston, but you can just short stroke it. Basically, if you're replacing this with anything else, you'd have to take a tooth off of it. Moving on, let's check the actual seal in the cylinder. I don't expect it's going to be great. I mean, we've got no O-ring. It's a very basic Gen 8 nozzle here. No O-ring. Yeah, it's not great. We could probably improve on that. I'm just going to whack an O-ring into that. This really does bring me back to the Gen 8 days when everything was garbage and you'd have to upgrade it straight away. Alright, I've broken out the good old green O-rings. Give it a bit of a stretch and let's pop that in. Maybe I stretched it too much. Alright, there we go. Okay, so that's not great. I'll try a different O-ring. Alright, I've just grabbed another green O-ring and this time I haven't stretched it. Used to be a trick back in the day, pre-stretching the O-rings. Let's give that a shot. Alright, that's much nicer. Much better seal. The nozzle is still not great though. So there's no O-ring in there, so the seal of the actual piston is okay, but with the nozzle, not great. Not great. Probably not gonna get a whole lot better than that. I mean, keeping in mind this is a cheap blaster in the scheme of things. A relatively cheap blaster, so expect relatively cheap blaster things. Interestingly enough, I just knocked off a one of the shims accidentally there, and sorry, one of the bushes, and I did notice there are shims, so at least someone's cared enough to place some shims in there. Trigger, nylon trigger, and it's just popped out of its position there. Just going to have to pop that one back in, keeping in mind that that mag terminal wire sits on the outside as well. Try not to get it tangled up in here. Everything's covered in grease, and so are my fingers. Ah, trigger springs. Alright, I'm just going to use this spiky thing to pop the spring in if I can. There we go. Watch it pop back out again. And get that bush back in there. I remember the good old days when all the bits and pieces, you'd have to hold it all in there while you reassembled it. Before gearbox tolerances were built well enough that you could actually sit things in there and let go of them. Alright, so that's not going to stay in there, I'm just going to have to hold it. Alright. I'm going to whack this back together. Try and do it while not losing any of the bits and keeping this wire on the outside. That's going to be fun. And putting this top weird spring thing back in. Alright, so get that bit there, hold that down there, and now this spring bit's going to be interesting because that's got to go on there. I know probably can't see this because I'm covering it with my hands a bit, but I know you guys like to see me suffer sometimes, so I'll film the whole thing. See if I can get that spring back in there. Oh yeah, that's alright. That's okay. I want to get these bushes to line up well. Everything looks okay. How are we going with the trigger? Alright. I think that worked relatively successfully. Just got to get the sector gear lined up. There we go. Relative success. Alright, I'm going to pop some screws back into this thing before it flies apart. And I'll see you in a moment. Alright, I just popped these two screws in just to stop the thing from flying apart on me when I'm talking here. Okay, one of the things I want to look at as well is this this barrel. It's a nice long pink barrel, and more so the T-piece. It's a massive T-piece, and I did give it the old blow test to check the pressure here. So when the nozzle's seated in the T-piece, it seems to have a pretty good seal. However, one of the things I noticed here is doesn't seem to sit perfectly flush in the end of the gearbox here, almost like there's a bit of manufacturing chad or something here that's just not allowing it to seat or something. Is that what's going on? Why is that? I feel like it's just a little bit off or something. I don't know. Maybe I'll give that a little bit of a file across the top of this. Alright, I've got a file here. Just gonna, where the two halves of the T-piece join,
gonna give it a little bit of a rub. Just because, I don't know, it doesn't seem to want to seat correctly. Then I'm gonna just clean that off of any of the chad that might be left behind. Alright, see how that looks. I think that looks a bit better. Yeah, and the nozzle, you can see the nozzle sits, when the nozzle's in there, it sits about 1 millimeter proud, and then when you push it in, I'm actually pushing against the tappet plate spring there. So, I mean, that in itself tells you that the tappet plate spring is providing a little bit of pressure into that T-piece, so there should be a pretty reasonable seal in there. Alright, moving on. What diameter, or internal diameter, is this lovely pink barrel? Looks like 7.6. 7.6 ID barrel, thereabouts. Yeah, interesting, and it's quite a long barrel as well for the well, I guess it is a SR-25, so it's got a long handguard, so it's got to have a long barrel. Let me measure that one. I'll need to enlist a tape measure. So to the sealing section of the T, it is 34 centimeters. Oh, the screw just flew out. Oh, yeah, cool story. My tape measure is magnetic, so it picked up one of the screws. Anyway, moving on. Alright, I'm going to slap all these screws back in, put this spring back in. What is this spring? It's pretty weak. It's probably like a let me grab another spring for comparison. Okay, so this is an approximately M85 out of an LDX gearbox. You can see it is longer and thicker, stiffer perhaps, maybe I should chuck this in just for shits and giggles, see how that goes. It does seem like it's a larger diameter too. Like this seems quite tight on the spring guide, whereas this one is quite loose. Interesting. I've actually got like an old sort of, it's a Gen 8 spring, with standard Gen 8 spring from a Singularity. A standard Singularity spring, I should say, not standard Gen 8. It's what they used to call a 1.2-ish. And I don't know what the M spec of that is. I might just throw that in for shits and gigs because I have no use for it. This was one of the things that always would get upgraded, so I might chuck it in. Interesting. I don't think. Yeah, right. Okay. So that plunger, the reason you've got a small diameter spring is because that plunger is a smaller diameter. So it won't take a standard spring. Well, that is interesting and annoying, isn't it? So, yeah.
saddening. I will have to put a couple more screws in now that I've got a spring. Alright, well, if I had received this in 2017, I probably would have been impressed, I guess. But I mean, there's so many other things on the market these days. I don't know, other than for the novelty of SR-25, I don't know why you would get this at all. I'm cutting those springs short because they're freaking annoying me. There's no need for them to be that long. It'll just cause problems, potential shorts. But yeah, like I'm not super impressed. It is cheap though. I mean, it is. I guess you kind of get what you pay for the price that it is. It is a cheap novelty, I guess. You probably wouldn't get this unless you want the novelty of the SR-25, the big 7.62 receiver. That's really the only thing I think it's got going for it. This is a same size box as a LDT War Interest box, so you could actually drop a decent box into the receiver. But if that was the case, why wouldn't you just buy the receiver? Pretty sure there are places that sell the receiver just on its own. There's probably no reason to buy the whole blaster and get all these other bits you don't necessarily need. But, you know, it is what it is, I guess. There are certain advantages to buying the whole thing in that, you know, you get your proprietary T-piece included, and you get your, you know, you get a nice billet chunk of steel. That's cool. Is that stainless? Let me get a magnet. Nope, not stainless, but still, it's a big piece of chunky metal. That's probably half the cost of the blaster. Alright, I'm going to whack all this back into the receiver, and then I'll see you in a moment. Alright, I have filed down the factory installed razor blades from this buffer tube, so that when it goes on, it's not going to cut the wires to pieces. It should actually just slide on there nicely without damaging them. I'm also going to have a look at the handguard of this, because I'm actually kind of interested in what's going on in the handguard of this particular blaster. So I'll pop this buffer tube on, and then we'll come back and have a look at the handguard. Alright, let's take a look at this handguard. In particular, the handguard and the way it's mounted on here. It's mounted on with these two incredibly long screws, and it just sort of looks like it's just, the nylon's just crushed between these two bolts here on the rail. All nylon, just only the bolts are metal, and then it looks like they're just crushed onto this barrel nut here. So I just want to pop this handguard off if I can. Seems fairly solid at the end there. So oh yeah, it does have a stabilizer at the front, which is good. I like to see stabilizer. And here's the barrel nut. Let's see if I can just unscrew this bright pink barrel nut. See what's in here. So there is a retaining grub screw here. Although not really done up super tight. I'm going to pop this suppressor off the end. Maybe I'll just pull this inner out of the handguard. Now it is being held in there by quite a nice little stabilizer in the end there. So it's actually doing quite a good job of holding it in there, which is good. Often you see these free float handguards free floating, which is a terrible idea in terms of accuracy. You'll never get good accuracy with a free floating barrel. Let's see, this T-piece sort of does sit in there. There's no spring that pushes any sort of backward tension on this T-piece to push it back into the what do you call it, into the gearbox at the top there. So that's something I kind of wanted to have a look at here. Okay, so if you hit it hard enough, it comes out. What I've found is, so this grub screw here actually holds it goes through the outer into this sort of T-piece interface here. So this T-piece interface, which basically goes there and holds the T-piece back into the gearbox, this barrel then goes over the top of that and just sort of press fits onto that, and then when you tighten this barrel nut on, you line that hole up with the grub screw, do that grub screw up, and it holds the barrel on. This piece here is the stabilizer, which again is just an interference fit, press fit onto the barrel, which lines up perfectly with that handguard and stabilizes the outer barrel. Stabilizes the outer barrel to the handguard. However, with the exception of this adapter at the end, which isn't even the right size, there is nothing stabilizing the actual barrel inside this inner. This inner is probably 16 mils ID roughly, and the barrel is about 9.5 OD. So yeah, there's quite a lot of slop inside there. It is nice that this has a stabilizer there for the actual nylon handguard, but there's nothing actually stabilizing the barrel inside the actual barrel inside the outer. So that would have been nice to see. And this thread of this barrel nut, I'm just going to check if it's the same thread as every other barrel nut to see if changing these handguards over would be a simple task. Alright, I've just pulled out a random aluminium quad rail handguard that I have lying around. I'm just going to see if this screws directly on, and yes, it does. So that's just a standard thread. So you can basically thread any handguard onto the end of that. You don't need this pink barrel nut, and you don't need this nylon handguard. You probably don't need this either. Alright, good to know. Let's whack all this back together. Alright, so I'm just going to whack the barrel adapter in there. I'm going to whack the... I guess I don't really have to whack the barrel in at all yet. No, I don't need to. I just kind of want to though, just to make sure that the T-piece sits in there nice and firmly, which it does. And of course the barrel nut screws on there, nice and tight. Now I'm just going to get the outer with the stabilizer into the handguard. Line up the outer barrel just with that grub screw hole there, just so that I can tighten that grub screw up and hold the whole thing in position. It's a bit of a janky system. Not sure I like it, but it is what it is. Now just push this handguard into position, and we'll just tighten these crimping nuts back up again. Just hand tight seems to be good enough. It's yeah, well, it is what it is for a cheap blaster. But it's good to know that the thread on the receiver is at least the same thread that you can put something better on here, or something more to your liking, or just something aluminium. Alright, now next thing I'm going to do, when I do put this together, I'm going to watch the T-piece if I can. Maybe I can't with this silly faux bolt in the way. I kind of want to watch the T-piece just to make sure that it's lining up with the gearbox, and that it sits in there nicely and everything. See what I can do. Okay, so I couldn't get that to go on because the T-piece actually fouls the front of the receiver here. So you've actually got to put the T-piece in first, like that, and then slide the receiver, the upper, over the barrel and everything else in one go. Which is a little bit awkward, but it's the only way that you can get the T-piece to go in. You can't run the T-piece in with the upper because it can't get past the magwell, the lower magwell. Alright, well, final thoughts. For the price, you know, it's cheap. It's got that nice big SR-25 receiver. It's kind of, look, it's not great. Let's be honest, it's not great. It's got some good things going for it, but you got that proprietary spring size, so upgrading the spring's not really gonna be achievable. You've got mostly nylon, very small amount of alloy pieces, and I don't know. It's if you really want this SR-25 big receiver, then I guess you got it for a relatively cheap price. But I think if you were planning on upgrading anything, you'd have to replace the entire gearbox. Then you'd have to work out something with the proprietary T-piece, because most of your V2 style gearboxes don't have that Gen 8 style nozzle, so that's already gonna cause complications for you. And then I mean, if you want, what it comes down to is, if you really want this receiver, then you can go with this. You could probably, just for mucking around, use it as it is. 200 FPS, it's okay, it'll get the job done, but it's not, by today's standards, it's not really that great, and it's not going to be easy to upgrade either. As I said, if I was given this back in 2017, I probably would have thought, wow, this is pretty good. But yeah, by today's standards, it doesn't really stack up. Anyway, that's all from me for today, I think. Don't forget, you can buy a patch from me off of FacePage, or if you enjoy what I'm doing here, you can buy me a coffee from the coffee link down below. Shout outs to those legends who have bought me coffees: Adam Hoy, Bill Thomas, and Ibmok. Cheers for the coffees, guys. Catch you later. Peace.